Hey, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Tonight, there is absolutely shocking new testimony in the form of witness affidavits and a summary of two witnesses' testimony about Rex Heuermann. Rex Heuermann is accused of being the Gilgo Beach serial killer, also known as the Long Island serial killer. Happy Wednesday, everybody. You made it halfway through the week. It is one of my top 3 favorite nights of the week. And those are the 3 nights when I get to come to you live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I will say I was absolutely shocked by what we heard today. And I think you will be too. This is new information that could change so much about the Rex Heuermann case. Right now, Rex Heuermann has only been charged with 3 murders. He's also been, I say only, only because there were 11 bodies found along a stretch of Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach. He's been charged with 3 of those murders, but he has not been charged with all of them. He is the chief suspect, we've been told, in a 4th. But at this point, the new information could link Rex Heuermann to 2 additional victims who were found along that stretch of highway in Long Island. It also could link Rex Heuermann to a victim where the murder victim was not found with an intact body. Thus far, law enforcement has only charged Rex Heuermann with murders where the victim was found with an intact body. This could change the way that he is perceived. It could change the entire course of the way law enforcement charges him. The third thing is that it's new information about his lifestyle, that he was a swinger. We'll talk about what was said today. And that his wife may have participated in his lifestyle or at a minimum known that it was occurring, raising the question, is law enforcement going to try to rope her into this sordid mess? We're going to get into all of that tonight. The way this all started off this morning, when I came into the office, there was an email from John Ray. You'll remember that John Ray is an attorney who represents the families of 2 of the Gilgo Beach murder victims. He emailed me a press release today. Maybe 2 months ago, John was on our channel and gave an interview and talked to us about the Gilgo Beach killer, about the victims who have been found, about the families that he represented, which we appreciated that he came on and gave us that interview. Well, he gave an interview, a press conference today, and was accompanied by the commissioner himself. We're going to see that. We're going to talk about all of that. Now, he represents 2 of the victims, Shannon Gilbert and Jessica Taylor. He has specifically asked people to contact him if for some reason they either don't feel comfortable, don't want to go to the police, just think they would be more comfortable talking to him. He's willing to take that information. He's willing to talk to anybody. He's put that out there, did that on our channel, done that elsewhere. And in fact, apparently people have come to him with information that he and the commissioner thought was important enough to disclose to all of us. So let's talk about it. Now, first, I want to show you what I got today so you can kind of be up to date. This was the press statement that he sent out announcing he was going to have a press conference today at 3:15. John Ray, the attorney for victims in the Long Island serial killer case, announces new evidence has been uncovered as to Rex Heuermann, Shannon Gilbert, and Karen Vergata. Shannon Gilbert and Karen Vergata were 2 of the bodies found along that stretch of highway. The evidence connects. Sorry, I'm trying to read it off the screen. That's not big enough for me. So let me make this a little bigger for me. Okay. The evidence connects Heuermann with Vergata and Shannon Gilbert. The evidence also expands knowledge and information regarding Heuermann and his wife. There will be available sworn statements of new witnesses. Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison will attend the press conference, and he did. So I also want to show you, this is a photograph of Karen Vergata, who disappeared long before any of the other victims who were found and whom Rex Heuermann has been charged with killing so far. She would be by far the earliest. Shannon Gilbert is one of the women who is represented by John Ray. And in fact, the search for Shannon Gilbert is what set off all of the finding of the bodies along that stretch of highway. She called 911. It was her call to 911 that set everything off. When they went looking for her, they found other bodies along that stretch of road. Unfortunately, they also found her body. Ironically, law enforcement for a long time has suggested that in fact, they concluded that she had not been murdered. She was not the victim of a homicide, that she died for unknown reasons in the middle of a swamp along Long Island. Without question, John Ray and her family vehemently disagree with that. They don't think that, they believe she was murdered, and they want law enforcement to treat it that way. And they may have made some headway toward that today. So what we're going to do is I have shortened the press conference to hopefully a manageable amount for one of our live streams. But I want to go through it and talk to you about, as we go through, about what I heard, what from a legal standpoint, what I think might happen with some of this. It is bombshell. It is such a surprise. You will be shocked from beginning to end. So let's take a look at this. And speaking of short and trying to make something short, life is too short to miss one of our live streams. So be sure to hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you back for more of our videos, and hit the like button too, if you would, for the video. That'll help it get out to more people. Now, remember, Rex Heuermann, it has not been charged with any additional crimes yet. There are, however, new witnesses, and that's what we're going to hear about from the press conference. This is new information that can take the case in a brand new direction to new potential victims and with new connections to Heuermann. So let's listen to the press conference. John Ray, you'll see him, is on the left, the commissioner on the right.
And up until now, we have not made it known to the public that we have been working together on this case steadily since the time that I came to know Commissioner Harris a year ago, February. Up until that point, the police department was very resistant to receiving any kind of evidence or information from my office from what I was doing. That all changed significantly when Commissioner Harris stepped in, and we began to collaborate. And we've collaborated ever since. That collaboration has had fruit.
So this is important just from the get-go, because we knew when John Ray spoke to us that there had been a lot of tension between law enforcement and some of the victims and some of the people in the community who felt that law enforcement wasn't trying hard enough to find the killer, wasn't trying hard enough to solve the reason that these bodies were found. So it's very interesting that the commissioner appeared with John Ray. I think it completely changed the character of the press conference, because if it had just been John Ray, I think there would have been a lot of question about whether it had any sort of connection to reality, whether or not it was actually something that law enforcement was looking at, or whether it was simply something that John Ray and his families felt was accurate. And I think this makes such a difference, because it says law enforcement is going to look at this. Law enforcement really cares about all of these tips and leads. Law enforcement believes that what John Ray is doing is important enough to go after figuring this out. So let's keep listening.
As to the first one I'll talk about, this is a witness who has every reason to have no bias, no interest in the case whatsoever. She was not a sex worker, is not a sex worker, and instead, back in the 90s, the 1990s, she was what is known then and now as a swinger. She would have a sex partner, and they would go to certain sex clubs in New York City where they would switch partners with other people of like kind. One of the most important places that they would go was called La Trapeze on West 27th Street in New York, right near Rex Heuermann's office. And this was a notorious place for swapping, for switching partners. Sometimes several hundred people at a time would be involved in this place in its heyday. Its heyday was in the late 90s, right at the time that Karen Brigada is involved in this case. In this situation, this particular woman was dating a police officer from New York City who was in narcotics, a detective, and
to start off just right there, that rings so many alarm bells because of the constant suggestion since the beginning of the investigation that police really weren't trying all that hard to find the person who was the killer. It certainly gives rise for the community to be concerned that perhaps there was some kind of cozy relationship. It doesn't prove it in any way, but it certainly makes it something that ought to be investigated, ought to be looked at, because that was the earlier suggestion.
They would go to these switchy clubs, these swapping clubs. At a certain time, at or about Valentine's Day of 1996, I believe, the couple went to La Trapeze, and I think it was on the wall at La Trapeze where an advertisement was placed to go to a house in Massapequa Park for partying, for switching, for swapping. She went with her boyfriend out to Long Island, but before they went...
At this point in the press conference, we'll just tell you, I was thinking, no, surely not, because we know that Massapequa Park is where Rex Heuermann lived. And could this possibly be that there was a placard or a notice hanging on the wall of this club saying, head out to his house for a party? We'll keep listening to what John Ray tells us the witness says.
Her boyfriend picked up a woman in New York, in the city, who had apparently just gotten out of jail, and she was disheveled and hungry, and she was a sex worker. We don't know the details yet of how he came to know her, but he knew her. And she came in the car with the two of them. They went to Massapequa Park. Before they got there, they stopped at a gas station, and the girl who was with them expressed some apprehension about where they were going and why. That was all wiped out when it was pointed out that he's a police detective, so don't worry, no problem. They ended up going to Rex Heuermann's house. In the house was the wife of Rex Heuermann and Rex Heuermann and the other girl. The other girl who we believe to be Karen Brigada.
This just really, I think, is heartbreaking. It's the description of Karen Brigada, or the person believed to be Karen Brigada, as disheveled and hungry and just got out of jail. That's just heartbreaking. I think that's really, really sad that it just makes her such a very human element to this. So let's keep listening to what happened, according to the witness, at Rex Heuermann's house.
This girl disappears downstairs at the house. Rex Heuermann disappears. And according to our witness and other witnesses I've talked to, when men are swingers with their partner, very often they switch sexually. They go back and forth between male and female. And so Heuermann leaves the main floor and disappears either into another bedroom or downstairs. It's not.
And that right there is a shocker, because up until now, the general belief of law enforcement was that the killer was only after women. And that made it somewhat confusing that an Asian male sex worker was found along that strip of highway. So as soon as they got to questions, one of the early questions was, well, what about that Asian male body that was found? If in fact Rex Heuermann was swinging either direction, does that mean that he could have killed this Asian male? Does that bring that back into the possibility as the possible range of people who could have been victims of Rex Heuermann? And the answer to that, what from law enforcement, from the commissioner, was, we're looking at everybody. We're looking at all of them. We haven't ruled anybody out. We haven't stopped investigating anybody. So don't worry, we're still working on that.
And the witness talks to Rex's wife. She doesn't want to have sex like she had expected to occur because our client believes, because our client is an African American woman, and Heuermann didn't like that. Ellerup rather didn't like that. So there was no sex between them, as was originally planned. Instead, the sex is between Heuermann and the other man. At some point, the witness goes looking for her partner and is kind of upset that he doesn't emerge. He emerges, and finally they leave, and kind of in a hurry. But when they leave, as they're leaving, the witness points out that you could see in the window, looking out, the girl that had come with them. And she says to her driver, her partner, "What are we doing? Are we taking her?" And the partner says, "Don't worry, they're just playing a game. She stays there, no problem." With that, the girl runs out of the house naked and is running in front of the garage. And now the witness says, "Hey, shouldn't we be taking her?"
Again, this is so tragic because, and I've moved the microphone away, so let me know if that's a little better. Some of you were saying in the chat that my voice was too loud compared to what you're hearing from the video. So hopefully this will be a little bit better. I'll try to tone it down. So to me, this is super tragic because if the witness is correct, we are looking at the final, at least days, maybe possibly less, for this young girl, Karen Vergata, who has just gotten out of jail, who's hungry, who's disheveled, and who is now running around naked and is being left behind by the people who brought her. And you're going to hear what the police officer boyfriend said.
Something's wrong here. And the driver tells her, "Nah, they're just playing a game. Leave it." And they leave. She never hears about the incident again. She distinctly remembers Heuermann. She also had intercourse with Heuermann that same day. And she kind of buries it and forgets about it. Until on TV, she sees the picture of Karen Vergata. And she recognizes her and said, "That's her." And she recognizes Rex Heuermann. And so she comes forward, and I meet her. I interview her at great length. I also had the police department. We arranged for detectives to interview her. And I found her story. I interviewed her for 3 times for a total of 9 hours. And I found her story to be credible.
We are going to, so this to me is pretty important because it means that law enforcement took the story, took the witness seriously enough that they went to talk to her themselves. They went with John Ray. They didn't just say, "Yeah, let us know if anything important happens." No, they also talked to this witness. And so they also heard the story, could evaluate the witness directly, eye-to-eye contact, whatever the witness was saying. So to me, that's really important because because of what it indicates about law enforcement and what it indicates about the ultimate credibility of the witness. Because in my view, if the witness had been deemed to be just nuts, totally off the wall, made no sense, I don't think the commissioner would have stood up there with John Ray. The commissioner, at a minimum, wants to take very seriously what was said. So I think that says something pretty important about what the witness has to say and about whether or not it will ultimately, in the end, be believed. It also is so distressing that this young girl was left behind like that and left alone. It's really terrifying. I would imagine that this was an extremely difficult thing for this witness to come forward. I can see why she maybe went to John Ray first, because she probably this person feels a lot of turmoil when she realizes that this may well have been one of the young women who was killed. This may well be one of the early victims of Rex Heuermann, at least one of the early ones whose body has been found so far. That would be so distressing. I can only imagine.
I just told you, you will find there. The second witness who's come forward. This woman is not a sex worker, never was. She's not a switcher or swapper. She's not involved in any sexual activities whatsoever. She has nothing to gain by coming forward. She's not looking for a book or money or the usual things that you're hearing about out there. None of that. But she came forward because she's very disturbed about what she knows after she also saw Rex Heuermann on television and Shannon Gilbert. And here's her story. She is a banker by day, and at night she worked extra in Suffolk County as a taxi driver to take care of her family. It was a one-parent family.
So one of the things that John Ray is doing for people listening to the conference is setting up the fact that this witness is separate from a different area. She's a banker. She is a taxi driver. Her connection is not because of what for many of the others was involvement in the sex industry. So to the extent people dismiss or don't listen to or believe the testimony of somebody who's a sex worker, none of those things are here. He's saying this witness did not have a reason to lie. This witness had jobs that you would typically respect, and therefore you should listen to what she has to say. That's his point.
Driver, she is called from her dispatcher to go to the Sayville Motor Lodge on Sunrise Highway, that infamous place that the commissioner here busted a year ago, and for prostitution and other illegal activities. She's called to go to that place, and that there's a girl awaiting her who's locked in a bathroom and will come out if she flashes her lights and beeps the horn. And she goes there and does that several times. It doesn't work. But then suddenly a giant man who fits the description of Rex Heuermann comes out, and he's covering his face with his arms so he can't be seen, and he runs to a van or an SUV right nearby that's parked right there. She continues to flash her lights and beep her horn, and out comes a girl, crying, shaking, very upset, and gets in her car. There they talk for a while, and then eventually they drive to the Ronkonkoma Railroad Station so that this girl can go back in to New York City. This girl was a sex worker who was servicing the big man, and the man had seduced her into coming to Sayville by several times over the telephone, convincing her that he was just a nice man who was going to help and work with her to help her family, her mother, her sisters, and her boyfriend. Shannon has a mother, sisters, and a boyfriend at that time. She had her hair pulled back, and because she often wore wigs. This girl turns out to be Shannon Gilbert.
Now, if that girl is proven to be Shannon Gilbert, that's hugely important for John Ray and for Shannon Gilbert's family, because despite the fact that law enforcement has charged Rex Heuermann, They have not charged anybody with Shannon Gilbert's death. In fact, they haven't even acknowledged that it was a homicide. So this would be hugely important if John Ray can connect her to Rex Heuermann, to the other victims. That makes an enormous difference in taking law enforcement to the point where they would say, yes, this was a homicide and we think Rex Heuermann might be guilty. So he's trying to make all of those connections. So this is a hugely important witness in that matter.
Now, Shannon is lured into doing this particular tryst, and she's given an envelope, or shown an envelope by the man that looked like it was stuffed full of money. And he tells her, there's $1,000 in there. It's for you and your family no matter what happens tonight. She looks in the envelope when he goes to the bathroom, and it's stuffed with paper. And so she panics and realizes something's wrong. So she goes in the bathroom, and he had become very aggressive, very angry. She goes in the bathroom, locks the door, and calls to get a cab. And that's how she comes out. They speak for over an hour. So the driver knows her well and notices that she has a drooping eye, which is characteristic of Shannon, and also a characteristic of her family, by the way, going back for a generation or two. And so she notices that, and it helps her to remember Shannon when she sees her later on.
So these little details are things, and I'll make it a little bigger to talk to you for just a minute. These little details are critically important for linking Shannon Gilbert to Rex Heuermann. And that's why John Ray is throwing all those little details in there. The drooping eye, the way they knew each other, the fact that the taxi driver spent a significant amount of time with her and was clearly able to identify her. All of those things are really important for his client.
The first part of the story doesn't end there. This is part two. Several days or weeks later, it's not clear, and this is all occurring in the fall of 2009. This is all occurring. The driver gets another call from the same dispatcher and says that there's a man named Matt who she's to pick up right off of exit 59 in the expressway, and he would be at a bar that was there by, I guess, Ocean Avenue, somewhere over there. She goes there, pulls up on a side street between the bar and a house right next to it, and she sees a girl in a window, and then she sees to the right of her a huge man rising up, coming to the car. He's dressed in camouflage, and he leans in and then jumps in the back seat, sits on the edge, and leans over and starts talking to her. And she's watching him very carefully in the mirror. And she recognizes him as the same guy that was at the motel a little while before. And she now knows him to be, she recognizes him from the media as Rex Heuermann.
So this is going to figure prominently in what he's about to say, because one of the questions that immediately popped to people's minds is, okay, if in fact this witness knew these people, recognized the girl, recognized Rex Heuermann, why didn't she come forward earlier? And so what he's going to say is that she did come forward. Well, you'll hear it. We'll keep going.
He says to her that he wants her to take him on a long trip into the woods. In other words, he changed the destination she had been told, which caused her immediately to become suspicious. And he was very upset, very angry, and he began to dispute with her when she said, "I'm not going on a long trip anywhere." And with that, he gets extremely angry and threatens to kill her.
So this is critically important because it's showing a side of the person they believe is Rex Heuermann, very violent, easily angered, and carrying a gun around, threatening to murder people. That this whole attitude, this whole side of things, that there's a witness to that side of Rex Heuermann. That's going to figure importantly.
It tells her, "I already want to kill you. Just give me a reason." And he had a gun, a handgun. she says, I'm not going anywhere at this point, and she turns off the car, and she says, you can have the keys, you can have my money, whatever you want, just let me go. I'll let you have whatever you want. With that, her dispatcher is on the radio, and he says out loud, we see you, we hear you, we can tell who you are, and the man panics, gets out of the car. She's then able to drive away. She encounters a police car coming the other way. She believes that the police officer was called by a 911 caller on that issue. Could have been the girl who was in the house right next door from where she was.
May I say that when they mentioned this girl in the window, I thought she was going to figure partly I were going to have testimony that this was, or that he was going to say, the witness would say this was one of the, maybe Shannon again. And it turns out she was just maybe the person who called 911, or perhaps was with Rex Heuermann earlier.
But comes the police, driving slowly with his lights off. She tells him the story, and the man had on a lanyard with a placard of some kind, as if he were a police officer. And she asked him, are you a cop? And he said, yes. She said, from where? He said, Brooklyn. With those facts in mind, she tells the police officer who's driving, there's one of yours back there, and it looks like he's had a bad day. So you better go see what's what. Word to that effect. She later on hears from her dispatcher that this man, went into the woods and fired off his pistol twice.
I don't know if you are with me on this, but I found this little section confusing. I couldn't really figure out I assumed the man who went into the woods and fired the weapon twice was Rex Heuermann, but I couldn't quite follow all that. But what we'll do is look at the affidavits themselves, because I got those from John Ray's office after the press conference. So I'll look at those. We can look at them together and look at specifically what it is that the witness says, the taxi driver says.
And she recognizes him very clearly to be Rex Heuermann when she sees him. So she's given us this affidavit as well. There's a pattern that's developing here of Rex Heuermann being somebody who tracks down people and haunts them. And Shannon Gilbert would therefore be no exception. Now,
such a really chilling description of a person, isn't it? Someone who tracks down people and haunts them. Terrifying. And generally shows violent tendencies. Now, there will be a fight over whether evidence of this kind has any place in the murder trial. Does it simply showing that someone's violent, simply showing that someone says, maybe the threat to murder somebody would be in a different category, but just showing that someone is in general violent might not be connected if it's not connected directly to the murders. This will be a fight. I guarantee you there will be fights over whether some of this information comes in if law enforcement concludes that it's credible. And you'll hear that they haven't totally decided on that score yet.
Third witness has not given a statement yet. The third witness contacted me from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. That witness clearly recalls being picked up. She was a street walker. She gets picked up by Rex Heuermann in Queens, and he drives, I think, near the big center there in Queens, and he drives her into a park in Flushing, where he makes her keep her head down at all times, commit oral sex, and then he has a pistol in his hand and tells her, get out of the car or I'm going to kill you. And don't do anything except what I tell you to do or I'm going to kill you. So she gets out of the car and he tells her, he tells her, I want you to pick up another person, another customer.
Just extremely chilling. Again, very violent. Again, threats to kill somebody. And again, with the gun. All things we saw with the taxi driver as well.
She gets out of the car and immediately pulls up another SUV and a man driving it, an African-American man. And the guy that picks her up is white. And she gets in the other guy's car. And the driver, Rex Heuermann, follows the car. They go. Finally, get out of the car because she panics and pulls the wheel because she sees a cop car coming. So the cop sees them go jagging off the road, and the cop stops them. The cop then goes back, talks to Rex and the other driver who gets out and walks back. The cop comes back and tells her, lady, if you want to make a complaint, you have to go to the precinct, and drives away. That's her story. She also has no reason. She refuses to come forward. She refuses to have herself identified. I know her name. I know her address. I've given it to the police. They're aware of it, and presumably they're investigating it. You see the pattern. There's a pattern of a guy who likes to play kind of sporting games with the sex workers, chases them, haunts them, hunts them. That's what we're looking at here, we believe, anyway.
The word hunt, that is so terrifying because particularly of where the bodies were found. The bodies were found wrapped in hunting burlap, camouflage burlap, and in basically the wilderness along the side of the road along the beach. So with no people around, and it wasn't developed property. So that's just extremely chilling as a word or image. Not to say that he's saying they were actually hunted, but just the whole image of it is terrifying, particularly given the circumstances. Now, notice that there's not an identification for either of these witnesses of a particular incident or victim of any of the bodies found alongside that beach highway. These are more general about violent tendencies. This latter one is about violent tendencies toward a sex worker. So there's that connection as well. But John Ray is absolutely right that this is relevant to how the person is viewed. Now, will it come in evidence? There will definitely be a battle over that. So let's keep looking. And I want to say thank you to Marta. I really appreciate the super chat.
The fourth witness, and I'll finish on that, she comes from another state, and she's contacted me as well. I have very lengthy notes and recordings of what we discussed. She was a sex worker for many years, back in the time when all of these killings were occurring, and she serviced Rex Heuermann. She said that she would service Rex Heuermann over 20 times, and that he was a serial user of sex workers. He would sometimes have them come two at a time to his house, and his wife was home upstairs, and in one instance got very angry at one of the sex workers because the wife believed that the worker had stolen an iron for ironing clothes and had it in the car with the driver. So the driver had to get out. Everybody had to search the car. There was no iron. But the wife knew about it and knew about, obviously, what was going on in order for that to happen. So she says that in her experience with Heuermann, he was never impolite. He was always nice. He was always funny. He treated her well, and there was no violence. But he certainly had contact with Rex constantly for a period of several years. That's as much as I'm able to tell you. I don't.
So, and before we get to the Q&A where I did some excerpts about that, let me just say a couple of additional points. Now, this fourth witness, there is no violence here. So this sort of contradicts some of the evidence that was mounting otherwise, that he tended to be very violent when he was around sex workers, and that he was frightening, that he scared people, that he threatened to murder people, that he carried a gun and threatened people with the gun. This is different because this is someone who's funny. She said he was always nice, never impolite. Probably the most important impact of this is for Rex Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup, because the implication of this is that she was fully aware of his lifestyle. Now, law enforcement did not accuse her, even though hairs that were compatible with her hair were found with some of the bodies. Law enforcement made a point of suggesting that that could have come from something like duct tape that was around the bodies that would have been around the house. So it didn't necessarily implicate her. And she had been out of town at the time that the women disappeared. This suggests that Asa Ellerup had more knowledge about his lifestyle. It doesn't really get specifically into whether she has knowledge about murders or about the way people were treated, but certainly it suggests more of an involvement in his lifestyle. So I think that's probably why this witness was included and was considered to be important. So, and now the commissioner is going to be asked, okay, do you find these witnesses credible? Do you believe them? And is Rex Heuermann now a suspect for Shannon Gilbert, for Vergata? Is he a suspect in these murders?
Rex Heuermann, the prime suspect.
And I cut it off just a minute. Let me tell you, his exact words were, I don't want to make Rex Heuermann the prime suspect. I will say this.
I'll share this over and over again. The creation of the task force got us into a good place of being able to identify Rex for 3 of the sex workers that were discovered, and we're looking very good for the 4th one.
Now that's important because people have been wondering when, if ever, Rex Heuermann was going to be charged with the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. We've been told from the beginning that he was the chief suspect, but no specific allegations were made that Rex Heuermann was connected to her murder. So this is an indication that law enforcement is getting close. The prosecution is getting close to charging Heuermann on that.
But we also added 2 more investigators to the task force to take this type of information in and to pursue it, to follow it, to see if this is credible. That's very important, and that's why people don't understand. When I first came into this position, I sat down with John Ray, myself and the members of the task force, to have that conversation about information that he may have, and let's make sure we're putting a dragnet out there regarding any information that's coming to us. That's why I'm going to continue my partnership with John. And if people have a reluctancy to come forward to law enforcement and they want to go to John Ray, then it's important that we take this information and then we follow forward with furthering the investigation. Make sure that we look under every single stone to see if there is any connection to Rex Heuermann, or if there is a connection to somebody else that may be involved with the bodies that were discovered in Ocean Parkway.
So it appears that the reason that the commissioner attended the press conference, stood next to John Ray, was to emphasize how much law enforcement wants tips, how very much they are eager to have people come forward and to give them information so that they can track down the killers of all of the bodies there along the stretch of highway, and specifically so that they can charge Rex Heuermann with all of the things for which he truly is legitimately guilty of. So, and if you couldn't hear very well, the reporter asked, did you know about these affidavits before today? And he's going to answer that question.
Actually sat down with the person myself. This just shows you my vested interest in it. We're going to make sure we're doing our job and trying to nail down time frames, look at radio runs and other things that can help us kind of pinpoint if there is any credibility to these complaints that came forward.
And the commissioner did send 2 detectives to interview the other witness with me, which we did already and at length.
And I thought that was important that for both of the key witnesses who gave affidavits, law enforcement was present as the witness was interviewed. That certainly suggests that law enforcement at least considers it credible enough to be thoroughly investigated, not something that was just dismissed easily. It was something they're still looking at. And I think that's really important. Now, there's going to be a question to John Ray about, well, why did these people wait to come forward? And John Ray seemed to be wanting to answer that right up front. I personally didn't think that was all that strange. It certainly received a lot of publicity around the time of the arrest, and I could see where people might learn about it during that time. So you'll hear his response.
Yes. Yeah, it was certainly a question we had to ask. We have to ask many questions to test credibility. And so we had to test that too. And in the one case with the witness with the swapping, it bothered her that they left behind this girl, but she had no other reason to think anything of it until she saw this. She actually broke down. She couldn't believe it when she saw the picture and knew that girl.
And that certainly seems like a very a natural reaction.
That happened there with the taxi driver. The taxi driver did report it. The taxi driver, back when this originally happened, she talked to her cousin cop. She spoke to her family. She spoke to other taxi drivers. She told a lot of people about it. And then she did contact Crime Stoppers and report it and actually talked to them twice, but nobody called her back. So that's long before the commissioner was involved.
She doesn't have a stake in the game. She's a cab driver at night, had a profession during the day. You know, she's not necessarily from this neighborhood. So, you know, little things like that kind of pique my interest. And once again, is this, you know, why did she come forward and her role and story and everything? It's something that we need to take a closer look at, and we need to make sure we're investigating it. And that's why the task force will stay in place. That's why we added more manpower to it.
So for both of the people talking today at the press conference, they both believed that she came forward when she had a reason to believe that someone would listen, that the taxi driver had tried to come forward before and hadn't received any response from the police, which again bears out some of the criticism of law enforcement there, that they weren't really pushing to find the killers, that there wasn't the robust investigation that you now see under this commissioner. And so John Ray is saying that, and think specifically too about what it is that the commissioner says, because the commissioner says he thought, look, she is somebody who's a cab driver at night. She's not involved in this whole world. She has a different profession. She's not from this area. She doesn't have a lot of reason to lie. And so that made him think, this is somebody I want to hear. I want to hear her out because I don't see a reason that she would come forward. And then John Ray is saying, yes, she in fact did come forward, and that would explain it.
Bodies that were discovered. Let's not rule out Peaches, the Tyler, the Asian male. I know those were the names that I shared with Tony, but it doesn't mean that we're not continuing to look at all the bodies that were discovered there. But the ones right now that John has, when it comes to Ms. Regata and when it comes to Ms. Gilbert, are the ones that we're going to take a closer look at and see if they're connected to our defendant. Yeah, so I know our district attorney should be doing an announcement real soon, and he'll keep you advised regarding if there's a nexus to the DNA that was recovered, and if there is a match.
Really important, because this is again suggestion that we're going to hear about Maureen Brainerd Barnes really soon. There should be an announcement really soon, and he's even going to tell you maybe this week.
So, knowing that indicates he's probably potentially bisexual.
And this is where the reporter is asking about the Asian male and whether or not that could now, if Rex Heuermann is bisexual, if that could be someone he also murdered. And I want you to hear this last statement by the commissioner.
Anything is possible. We are not done with this investigation. I want to make sure that that's very clear.
And so, and I also just want to say, I really appreciated that he named some of the other victims who were found along the beach there, because it is so critical that law enforcement not stop pushing to find whoever murdered those people as well. There are other bodies. And if Rex Heuermann did not murder those people, then law enforcement needs to push until it finds the person who did. That's critically important for obvious reasons. Let me remove that from the stream. So John Ray's office sent me the affidavits that were actually filed. I'll be going over those. We'll look at those together and we can think through those. Now, I will be doing a deep dive on those very soon. We are also behind on the Corey Richins jailhouse phone call with her brother that I've been promising you. I know some people, at least one person came last night like, hey, what about the jailhouse phone call? And we preempted that for the big news on the Murdaugh case. If you haven't watched that, Murdaugh was given the chance to file his motion for new trial. The case will go back to the trial court for a determination on whether or not he will get a new trial. He at least gets to file his motion. It doesn't mean he gets a new trial, but you can hear all about what we talked about last night. So there is just news popping like crazy. Be sure to hit the subscribe button because you definitely don't want to miss this. And also, if you would, please hit the like button. I will see you. I don't have my outro, so I'll just say I will see you on Friday at 7 p.m. for our regularly scheduled time, unless I have time to do the Corey Richins tomorrow. And if I can't get to Corey Richins on Friday, I will just do an extra one this weekend. So you won't have to go much longer to hear that. It will be coming, I assure you. So I will see y'all all Friday at 7 p.m.